Hi friends, and welcome to another story with Miss Wolf Reads. I'm Miss Wolf, and today I'm going to be reading a story that I've had since I was a very, very little child. My mother actually gifted me this book when I was little, but she had had it since before I was born. So this story is near and dear to my heart. I grew up loving it as a child, and I'm excited to share it with all of you. I want to note that the book was printed in 1982, which was before I was born and before I'm sure most of you were born. And the pages are a little old, so I'm going to be pretty gentle with opening it to show you. The pictures are very pretty, but the binding is getting a little worn, so I'm going to be going a little slower today. And I'm probably not going to get the best angles when I show it to you, just because I want to be gentle to not make the book fall apart. This story that I'm going to read is called The Unicorn and the Lake. It's by Marianna Mayer, and the pictures are by Michael Hague, and it's beautifully illustrated. A lot of time and effort went into the art for this story. It's evident in the details and the coloring, and it's a really pretty story. It, like I said, was printed in 1982, so it's an older story. And the dedication on the inside says, "To my sister, Gabriella Amirati, and to Nikki." So both the author and the illustrator made a dedication. Let's all take a deep breath. And let's begin. The Unicorn and the Lake by Marianna Mayer, pictures by Michael Hague. There's a piece of information on the first page that is more factual than the fictional story that is inside, so I'll read that first. The legend of the unicorn can be traced back to pagan times. In 400 BC, Ctesias, a Greek writer and physician to the Persian court, reported sightings of this creature by Persian travelers to India. The unicorn is the only fabulous beast that does not seem to have been conceived out of human fears. In even the earliest references, he is fierce yet good, selfless yet solitary, but always mysteriously beautiful. He could be captured only by unfair means, and his single horn was said to neutralize poison. The unicorn is mentioned in the Old Testament, and during the Middle Ages, passages referring to him were frequently cited by theologians, encyclopedists, and storytellers. By AD 300, the unicorn was fully adopted by the Christian world. Indeed, he had become a symbol of Christ himself. My tale, The Unicorn and the Lake, is based on three specific sources. The Physiogilus, an early Greek book of natural history, was written before AD 400 and elaborated upon in the centuries that followed. A later version, written between the 12th and 15th centuries, describes the value of the unicorn's horn in absorbing poison and mentions a great lake where the animals gathered to drink. This book exists today in countless versions, most commonly known as bestiaries. In 1389, Johannes de Hesse, a priest of Utrecht, claimed to have visited the Holy Land and to have stopped at the river Mara. His observations are recorded in the Itinerarius. Quote, "And even in our times it is said, venomous animals poison that water after the setting sun, so that the good animals cannot drink of it. But in the morning, after the sun rises, comes the unicorn and dips his horn into the stream, driving the poison from it, so that the good animals can drink there during the day. This have I seen myself." Unquote. My final source of materials for the tale was the 7 unicorn tapestries that are a part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's collection at the cloisters. In the second of these tapestries, The Unicorn and the Fountain, the use of animal and plant mythology further emphasizes the borrowing of this legend. Each animal and plant depicted has an association with either the unicorn or his enemy, the serpent. The stag was believed to devour serpents, but he needed fresh drinking water to quench the poison of their venom. The theses flower and the common agromony, which is hemp, were used against poisoning. The blue-flowered sage was planted to repel snakes. The woodhaven was cultivated to keep evil away. These are all different kinds of flowers that were found in that tapestry. And if you were in my language group this year at school, you learned all about the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And this was a big piece of cloth that was ornately designed with a picture of a unicorn and a serpent on it and a lot of flowers. Today it is said that the unicorn never existed. However, it is marvelously clear that when the unicorn was first described and centuries later when the tapestries were woven, everyone believed in unicorns. And this is from the author Marianna Mayer. So she explains where she got her inspiration for the story that we're about to read. Let's begin. Once, long ago, all animals lived in harmony. There was no strife among them, and they were able to speak together in a common language. At that time, mysterious and wonderful events took place, and the noble unicorn dwelt with the other animals in the lower lands. Do you know what the word strife means? How about the word dwelt? The unicorn was pure white as mountain snow, and his ivory horn was a magnificent spiral. Men believed the unicorn was immortal. They hunted him relentlessly, for it was said that his horn possessed magical powers. At last, the unicorn was forced to flee high up into the mountains to escape the hunter's arrows. There are the hunters, and there's the unicorn running away. His vanishing caused magic to pass from the land. Soon, all living things forgot the unicorn, and animals lost the power to speak to others unlike themselves. Thereafter, the bird spoke only to birds, the rabbit only to rabbits, the rat only to rats, and so it was throughout the animal kingdom. During this time of forgetfulness, many kinds of animals lived along the banks of a large lake. Though they could not speak together, the lake was vital to them, and they willingly shared it. Their only enemy was the serpent. He preyed upon them mercilessly, casting a shadow over their lives. Here are the different animals who can only speak to other animals like themselves, mice and rabbits. Here is the serpent. We've learned about the word protagonist, which means our hero, and we've also learned about the word antagonist in my language group, which means the enemy of the hero. And so here we've learned who our antagonist is, the serpent. The lion, the leopard, and the stag fought the serpent boldly. Other animals lacking strength defended themselves with cunning. The pheasant distracted the serpent with his brilliant feathers to give his family time to flee. The partridge covered her eggs with dust and laid sharp, thorny shrubs over her nest to hide it. The weasel used her keen eyes to watch for the serpent, and the birds changed their sweet songs to cries of alarm to warn of the serpent's approach. So all the animals are adapting so that they can survive. But in time, a greater danger, a sadness came to the forest. For months there had been no rain. Slowly the lake began to recede, and the banks turned muddy. The animals struggled vainly to reach the shallow water. Many were so weak from thirst that they could no longer fight off the serpent when he attacked. Still, no rain came. The fish were dying without water. They gasped desperately, then finally laid still and lifeless beneath the burning sun. The heron, the duck, the water rat, and other animals who fed on the water life began to hunt in vain for other food to eat. But the venomous serpent was glad of the others' trouble. All the better for me, he thought wickedly. Now I will not have to hunt so hard for my food. There's the dried up lake, and there is the serpent. The valley too began to dry without rain, and a drought fell over all the forest. The clinging green foliage that had once covered the forest floor died, and the ground cracked under the feet of the animals. Leaves from tall black walnut, beech, and oak trees turned brittle and dropped to the dusty earth. The animals grew more desperate as each day passed. They knew that without rain to fill the lake, they would surely die. Night after night, the frog, who had lost his watery home, croaked mournfully for rain, but none came. At last, leaving their natural differences aside, all the animals came together to call to the rain clouds. Ignoring the scornful serpent, they looked up at the pale moon and almost cloudless sky and called for rain to bring life back to their lake and forest. All the different animals of the forest are gathering together. The illustrations are so pretty in this story. High up in the mountains, the hoary marmot, who called himself the Whistler, sat at his patrol watching for enemies. As he faced the shifting wind to catch unfamiliar sounds, he heard the animals' voices and sent out a shrill cry of warning. All the mountain animals, large and small, were altered. Among them was one who lived in secret, deep within the mountain caverns. Many years had passed since he had been seen, and his magical horn had been forgotten. He, of course, was the unicorn. Hearing the Whistler's warning call, he left his den and leaped swiftly from the mountain top to mountain top until he stood upon the highest pinnacle. Far below, the unicorn saw the animals, and he understood their distress. Rearing up his powerful body, he pierced the clouds with his sharp horn. Once, twice, 3 times he struck the clouds. Suddenly, lightning flashed, and rain began to fall upon the land. It rained that night and all the next day. Rain fell on the animals and they rejoiced. The nooks and crannies of the mountains collected the rain and sent streams of fresh water flowing into the lake. The serpent looked on angrily and plotted against the animals while they drank and bathed playfully in the lake. Late that night, while some slept and others were busy with their nocturnal duties, he plunged into the lake and spat his deadly venom throughout the water. The next morning, as the nightingale sang, the animals came to the lake, but the water was dark and foul-looking, and none would dare to drink. What does nocturnal mean? Do you know? Again, the animals cried out in anguish, and hearing them, the Whistler repeated his warning. Oh, oops, I think I forgot to show you the picture. Here's the serpent poisoning the lake. I'll start again. Again, the animals cried out in anguish, and hearing them, the Whistler repeated his warning. At the sound, the unicorn left his cave. Far below, he could see the poisoned water and the animals huddled together forlornly. Slowly, majestically, he began to descend the mountain. As he came among them, the animals of the lake stopped their shrieking and were silent. Some wept openly at his beauty. Others were shy and cast down their eyes. The serpent, coldly luminous, lay watching nearby. He alone held the ancient memory of evil, and it had given him mastery over the others. But now he felt his power ebbing away. Anger filled him, and he grew to enormous size. Suddenly he coiled and struck the unicorn from behind like a whip. Have you ever felt so angry that you feel like you get bigger because you're so full of this powerful feeling that's hard to control? That's how the serpent is feeling right now. And he expands to this huge size and attacks the unicorn. Why is the serpent angry in our story right now? What's happening for him? Can you understand? Is he violent, or is he scared that he might lose what he has? Fear gripped the animals as they watched the battle. The serpent wound himself like steel bands around the unicorn's hind legs. A fierce war cry came from the unicorn as he struggled to free himself. His nostrils flared and he reared up with his forelegs thrashing. Sharp cloven hooves came crashing down upon the serpent, whose strong hold began to weaken. The unicorn was gigantic in his mighty splendor. His spirit was ruthless, and his mane flowed like wind-swept flames. Over and over he screamed and struck until the viper was overwhelmed and powerless. Whirling around, the unicorn drew back and faced his enemy. Then his blue eyes caught the serpent's, and the evil one felt shame pierce his cold heart for the first time. He slithered away in fear, knowing that one of his own kind would have never spared his life. So did the unicorn kill the serpent? Did he retaliate against his attacker, or did he let him leave? Finally, the unicorn came toward the lake, bent his proud head down, and plunged his horn into the water. Instantly, the lake gleamed pure, and all the animals began to drink. So what does it say about the unicorn that he let the serpent leave? How does that make you feel about his character and who he is? What lessons does it teach? He got attacked, but he didn't attack him back. He just defended himself. The unicorn gazed lovingly at each one of the animals, but his work was done, and he knew he could not live among them in the lower lands. Slowly, he began to ascend the mountain. Where his hooves touched the ground, ancient flowers bloomed once more. As he walked, a little magic passed over the animals, so they were able to talk again to each other as they had once long ago. When the unicorn reached the mountain top, the animals saw his distant silhouette etched clearly against the warming sun. The time of forgetfulness passed. The unicorn was remembered. Springtime spread through the forest again. Everywhere leaves unfurled, fern fronds opened, and birds built nests. Masses of flowers appeared, so that the forest floor shone with color and the forest resounded with joy. Warm breezes carried the scent of rich, moist soil, and dark green moss grew once more on the banks of the beautiful lake. The end. I really love this story growing up because of the big vocabulary words in it. I've always loved words, and learning new words has always been fun for me. I also like coming across words that aren't used as often, and this has a lot of really powerful vocabulary words in it, like dwelt or strife. Those aren't words that we usually hear as often, especially in children's stories. Strife means that you're having a hard time. You're maybe fighting or battling something, you're going through some kind of a hardship. And then dwelt means to live in a place. So I dwell in my house. And so dwelt is the past tense of dwell. And I loved the art in this book. It's beautifully illustrated. I really appreciate that in the layout. I'm not sure if you noticed as I was showing you the pictures, one page always has a full page illustration, and the other page where the words are written also has illustrations underneath the words. And that's a choice that the illustrator made and held consistently throughout the entire story. So if you noticed, every page has illustration on it, which isn't always the case. So I really appreciated the thought and care that went into the art in the book, and the story itself teaches a really beautiful moral. What is the moral of this story? I'll give you a moment to think about it. If you had to summarize the lesson that this book teaches, what would you say? There's a lot that goes into this story. It talks about jealousy. It talks about predators and prey animals. You know, it's natural for snakes to eat mice and things like that. I actually really like snakes personally, so I don't mind the predatory nature of animals that eat other animals. It's just part of life. So there's some of that in this, but the snake did get greedy. He wanted to eat all of the animals and not have to hunt them or work hard for it. And the working hard that predatory animals have to do is what keeps the balance. So wolves or sharks or snakes, when they have to hunt for their food, they don't usually catch their food. They definitely don't catch it every time. They catch it very rarely, actually. You can look up the statistics, but those predatory animals often fail. And it's the failing that allows the prey animals to go on living so that there's enough of them. So all the mice get to have little babies and keep living their lives, and the snake doesn't get to catch the mice as often as it tries. And this book shows us how important it is to keep that balance so that the snake doesn't get greedy. And when the snake gets violent and attacks the unicorn, he's afraid. He's afraid that he's going to lose what he has, and he has all this power that he's really enjoying keeping. But he doesn't win. The unicorn beats him because the unicorn is righteous, but he's only righteous because he doesn't attack him back. I really appreciate that the moral of this story is in protecting those who can't protect themselves, and how all of us should do our part to look out for those who are less fortunate. So the unicorn comes down and helps protect the animals of the forest, but he doesn't stay, he doesn't brag, he doesn't gloat. He goes back to his life and is content with the fact that he did the right thing for the sake of doing it. So I really love this story because it teaches us a lot about how we can live together in community and how we can protect each other, and also in the fact that it's okay to defend yourself, but you don't need to attack others just because they've attacked you. So I think that's a really valuable lesson too. Thank you so much for joining me. This was a longer story today. I appreciate your patience as I slowly turned the page, and I hope that you all enjoyed it. I'll see you again next time.